there, friends, it's Bryan, and we're back for another episode of What Books Made the Comic Industry, as well as the comic artists and the stories that surround them. Man, we got a good show for you today, featuring none other than the man who brought the funk, Jim Steranko. So you don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. It's going to be good.
Hey, welcome back, Bryan. It's been a while. Last we left off, we talked about the start of the Marvel era, things that Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko did, all the new characters they brought in. I think we kind of left off in the early part of the 60s.
Yes.
I think maybe like Thor, Iron Man was the last ones we mentioned.
Yes.
There are so many characters that they created. Really, the entire Marvel universe just about happened in the 60s. So there's still the X-Men that were formed. They did the Avengers, Doctor Strange, countless others. But eventually, like anything else, the roller coaster comes to a slowdown, comes to a stop, and they were starting to run out of ideas. Some of the characters that developed just wasn't holding interest anymore. So they needed to bring some new life into the comics to keep up their readership. Because really, when Marvel came about, there was that big rivalry now with DC Comics and who was the better brand. For me, it's always going to be Marvel.
Oh, me too.
Because we had discussed this back during the Batman discussion about how DC kind of lost their way after World War II. All the superheroes did. But DC just really never recovered after that and kind of just went downhill. And, it was like the 1966 Batman that kind of saved Batman, but not really the rest of the industry for DC. And the Marvel era kind of just took everything by storm. But, like moving back, even that kind of slowed down a little bit. So they wanted to revitalize. So they brought in some new talent. One of the biggest ones to make an impact that I have to really mention, and we'll talk about today, personal friend of mine, Jim Steranko. He started off with Strange Tales, which was a combination of Nick Fury and Doctor Strange, kind of like the old Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish books, where the book was split between two characters.
Yes.
Maybe we'll talk about how he got that gig, or do like a little bit of background.
Oh, please do.
Jim Steranko was, at the time, he was working for an ad agency. He was a graphic designer. That was his day job. And by night, he was a rock musician. he actually played rock and roll, toured mostly the Eastern Seaboard, playing gigs up and down the East Coast. Opened for some pretty big name bands like Bill Haley and the Comets.
What?
I'm sure you've heard of them.
Oh, definitely.
He actually opened for them. But he always loved comic books. From when he was a little kid, he was always finding little scraps of paper to draw things. That's how he learned how to read. His mother would read comic books to him. He fell in love with the art form and the industry. Being in advertising, he met some of the comic book artists and became friends with them. One name, notably Wally Wood. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yes, I have.
From back in the EC days, and the younger people recognize him from Daredevil. But anyway, Wally Wood was actually a good friend of his and hit him up one day and said, "Hey, I know how much you love comics. I think maybe you should give it a shot."
No kidding.
Yeah, and at the time, Wally Wood was working for, I believe it was Tower Comics. He was working on, what was his title? DNA Agents? Or DNA Agents? Does that sound familiar?
Actually, it does. I think I might have a comic or two from that.
Yeah, he was working on that at the time, and mentioned to the publisher that he had a guy interested in coming in.
Okay.
So he showed up. Steranko showed up with his portfolio. He had created a brand new character called Super Agent X, wanted to push that on and get a gig. So Wally Wood set up the interview, came in, basically got the job on the spot.
Wow.
Just because, I mean, when Wally Wood recommends somebody,
Yeah.
it carries some weight.
Yeah.
So he got hired. He introduced them to the person in charge of production of the comic books. So all of a sudden, he's no longer dealing with the head editor. He's not working with his pal Wally Wood. He's got this other guy that's now his boss, and he just treated him like crap, criticizing everything he did. He got so angry that he just grabbed his stuff and walked out.
Whoa.
Yeah, he quit because he wasn't gonna take getting bullied by some stranger.
Sure.
But now he had it in his head that he wanted to do, at least give comics a shot. So he visited a bunch of other publishers, tried to get his work published.
Right.
He went to, I'm pretty sure he went to, what was that, MLJ? Whoever was doing Archie's comics at the time.
Okay.
I know he spoke with them. He did go to DC Comics. Everywhere he went, everyone wanted him to work on their characters. But he wanted to sell his character, so he was hell-bent. He wanted to sell his new character. He wanted his own comic book. He didn't want to work on somebody else's stuff. So he kept turning them down. He turned down DC Comics and walked out.
Wow.
He wasn't interested. They offered him a job.
Wow.
This is all personal stories that he's told me how everything went down. I mean, you can find like shortened versions on the internet or in interviews that he's done in the past. So he went down to Paramount because, again, he really wanted to sell his character. So he went in there, met with some animators, and they liked what they saw. They were actually interested in turning his character into an animated series.
Oh, wow.
He said they laid out all the artwork on the floor, kind of like how animators put the storyboards up on the wall and kind of visualize the motion and the action.
Yes.
They did that with his artwork, and they liked it. They told him that they were ready to buy the property and sign a contract.
Oh, snap.
While they were getting that ready, he had some time to kill.
Okay.
So in that time, he decided to go visit the Marvel office. He got a gig. He basically got what he wanted. It wasn't comic books, but still, his character gets to come to life. So he doesn't, even if he laughs at the fact that he went to go see Marvel. So his story of how it went down is he walks in, there's a secretary behind the counter, and he says, "I'm here to see Stan Lee."
Oh.
And she kind of laughs in his face. And I want to say this had to have been maybe 67, maybe 1968.
Okay.
So Stan's pretty well established. I mean, he's not as established as he is today.
Right, but he's
known.
known.
But people knew who he was already.
Definitely.
So the secretary laughed in his face and says, "Stan doesn't see anybody." Jim's response to that was, "Stan will see me." And grabs her arm, puts his portfolio under her arm, and puts her arm down on the portfolio. And she's kind of in awe and walks off into the door, gone for a couple of minutes, comes back out and says, "Stan will see you."
No kidding.
That's how he claims it went down.
Okay.
So he says a lot of it was just banter back and forth, talking about a little bit about comic books, more about their background, his background, Stan's background, their common interests. Then Stan finally starts flipping through the portfolio. He said it was crude, but he liked the energy that he projected because Steranko was a big Kirby fan, so everything about his artwork was very dynamic, very visual and captivating, and that's what he tried to do with his artwork. So Stan's response was that he didn't have any openings at the time because they were full. But Stan's response was that he knew that if he let Steranko walk out of that office, he was going to go walk down to the DC office and get hired by DC. And didn't want somebody that talented working for his competition.
Sure. Wow.
So he says Stan's next response was he turned around, and behind his desk he had a rack full of all the current titles.
Sure he did.
Whatever was coming out for that month he had on his rack.
Okay.
And all he said was, pick one. So Steranko, wanting to prove himself, picked Strange Tales.
Okay.
And his reasoning was that was probably the worst selling title, which I believe it was. Because, Nick Fury, cool character, but, there's only so much you can do with a guy with the eye patch that's an international spy.
Sure.
So he kind of wanted to prove himself with that. And Kirby was also working on it. And, he was a big Kirby fan, so, getting to work with his idol.
Smart.
Who wouldn't want to do that?
Smart. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, he picked that. Stan gave him the job, and that's how he started.
Wow.
I want to say it was Strange Tales 154, or it was around there where he started. He inked Jack Kirby's layouts.
Okay. And that's usually the starting job for artists like that. They start to ink.
Typically, unless you're already seasoned, then you can go straight into penciling.
Okay, yeah.
And again, he was coming in when there was really no job available, so they really created something for him. So with Jack's plate pretty well full, the only thing is, lighten Jack's load, have a new guy ink his Jack's layouts.
Sure.
Which is what ended up happening. He did a great job. Good enough to, I think it was 3 issues later, where Jim was able to do all of the artwork himself. So he did the pencils, he did the inking himself. That's when he really took the character and made it his own. Because then you really saw his influence and the psychedelic aspect of his artwork. So like one of the examples I have for you to look at is...
Look at that.
Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. #1.
Mm.
So he took the Nick Fury character from Strange Tales and revitalized the character to the point where now this guy's able to have his own book. He's no longer splitting the book with Doctor Strange. And I mean, just look at what he's done with the optical illusions. And
it's just great. I'm proud to say, and lucky, that I got that in my personal collection. It's a great looking cover.
One thing he's always liked doing, and even to this day, is he likes to experiment with art. So a lot of things that he did was very experimental, just to see how the readers would react.
I would only guess that with his background in advertising, that would help that,
Absolutely. The flip side to that, though, is coming into an industry full of, I hate to call him old dinosaurs, but us being older guys, how we can be set on our ways and
sure,
not really willing to change as much. So imagine these guys that have been doing it since the 40s and 50s. All of a sudden, this new cat wants to try and change the game.
Right.
So he butted heads with them a lot.
No doubt.
When you bring something like this, and Stan looks at something like this, like what's going on here? Like this isn't a comic book. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Another good example is when he turned in #4. Another iconic cover.
Yes.
Originally, it was all black and white only.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And Stan wasn't having it. Stan was not happy.
Oh.
So yeah, they added a little bit of the color. But Jim being an artist and the man that he is, he stood his ground and said, no, this is what I produce. This is how it's going to be. And, they compromised. They made a little bit of change. But for the most part, his original vision stayed.
That's a dope-ass cover, though.
Yeah, I like this cover myself. Another one of his more famous covers from #6.
Yeah. Look at that.
Now, for the people that don't know, this is actually his homage to Wally Wood.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Wally Wood got his fame doing a lot of the EC comics, doing the horror and sci-fi, mainly the sci-fi stuff. There's actually an EC cover that's very similar to this, and that's why Jim decided to go with this image.
Nice.
The funny thing is, when Jim penciled this, he actually asked Wally Wood if he would want to ink this.
That's cool. That's hella cool.
The funny story to that is Wally Wood told him no. And the reason he told him no was that he told Jim that he puts too much stuff into his artwork.
Uh-huh.
Which made Jim laugh because clearly this is an homage to Wally. And Wally was famous for the same thing. Like, if you can find his EC work, I highly recommend looking it up. The detail that he put in. I mean,
so he was talking mess.
he was the George Perez of the day.
Oh, okay.
And if you know George Perez artwork, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Like, there's no missed detail.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you look at the Wally Wood in his prime, like, you want to talk detail. So yeah, Jim laughed at that. He says, I put too much detail in my work. So yeah, Wally still stood his ground, turned him down. So Jim inked it himself, which I think it came out all right. I don't know what you think. So yeah, he started to really build his name off of that. Didn't really last. We'll go back to with Stan disagreeing with a lot of the experimentation. Jim's a very smart guy, so he caught on really quickly that if he turned in his artwork too early, it gave editorial a lot of time to nitpick and go through and say, I want this change, you need to change that.
Right.
And you being an artist yourself, you know that it is a big insult for somebody to tell you, you need to change this. I don't like it.
Definitely. It's one to swallow. It's
exactly.
a hard pill to swallow.
Exactly. So when you're an artist at that level, nobody's going to tell you that you need to change something.
Yeah.
So what he started doing is he started turning his artwork in at the deadline. So that it didn't allow time for them to force changes.
Sure.
Obviously, they didn't like that. And they would consider that late.
Oh.
Because they didn't have time to do a once-over before it went to print.
Sure.
So what Stan did was he stuck in a filler artist. I believe it was in issue number 7. Because I think Jim only did the cover for that one. And Jim told him, if you continue to do this, I'm not going to do the book anymore. And Stan continued doing it, so Jim eventually left the book.
Oh!
He still did little things here and there. Stan was no fool. He knew what a talent that Steranko was. So he wanted him to come back and do more stuff. So he had him do a short little run on Captain America. And, short little run, and, I'll elaborate on that. Started off with that one.
Another great cover.
Yeah, the detail, the shading, everything he's done.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know, this is also the first appearance of Madam Hydra.
I did not know.
Yep.
I did not know.
So he created that character.
Wow.
She got her big fame on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So he did that one. Then he did this one you'll probably recognize. This is one of his all-time famous Captain America covers.
Yep, and another one I'm looking for. Aren't we always looking for stuff?
So he followed the same way. He turned in his artwork at the deadline so that things couldn't get changed. Stan didn't like that. So for issue 112, he added in a filler artist. And Stan told Jim's response was, if you do that, I'm going to leave the title.
Ooh.
Stan tried to call his bluff, brought in another artist for 112. Jim did 113 because he was committed to it, but that was his last book on Captain America. Again, Stan was no fool, so another dying title. They had him give a try with X-Men.
Now, the X-Men at that time still weren't what they are today.
Not even close.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read any of the old X-Men. I'm hypercritical about comics if you didn't know.
You snob.
The first few were pretty good. I mean, I have to admit, I like most of the single-digit X-Men I thought were pretty good. Getting into double digits, Juggernaut was cool. Introducing the Sentinels were good. but the stories just fell off really quick. Like I felt like they just ran out of ideas, didn't know what to do. Things got real goofy. You know, you had Frankenstein, just a bunch of nonsense.
Right.
So the book was really not doing very well at all. I dare say it was probably one of the worst selling books towards the end of the Silver Age run. So, you know, yeah, they brought in Steranko to try and revitalize the book. This book, he introduces Polaris. So he created that character as well.
Nice. And speaking of...
So the very next issue he did, you get to see that's what she looks like.
Yeah. This, oh, God, I am definitely saving some room on the wall to put this up.
One other little known tidbit that a lot of people don't realize is Steranko also created the new X-Men logo.
Did he?
That was his design.
Oh, wow.
Because if you look at the original X-Men logo from X-Men #1, that's how it looked.
Wah, wah, wah.
All the way up to issue 49. And issue 50, being a graphic designer, he wanted something a lot more exciting.
It just pops. Yeah. My goodness. My goodness. That yeah, I'm going to have to do another close-up of this. Look at this beautiful cover.
And you can see the Jack Kirby influence with, you know, the outstretched hand, the dynamic pose.
Right. That is a superb cover.
But unfortunately, even he couldn't save the X-Men. It went up to issue number 66, and the title was essentially canceled. From 67 on, it was just reprints. They just reprinted old stories with a small backup story at the end.
I'm trying to think of the title. What was the title? Was that the Tales of the X-Men, or?
It was still called X-Men.
Okay.
They just reprinted old stories.
Okay.
And that went out all the way up till issue 93.
Which,
you know, I'm sure we'll do a separate X-Men take, because there's so much with the X-Men that, you know, that's an entire episode on its own.
For real.
And yeah, we'll talk about, you know, the X-Men that people know today and how all that started. But yeah, that's essentially Jim Steranko. He eventually had his falling out with Marvel, the disagreement over artwork again, and that was kind of the last straw. And Jim and Stan parted ways because it was just too much. Stan wanted him to completely change an entire cover, and
you just don't do that.
Yeah. So yeah, Jim said no. So Stan ended up firing him, which I think was for the best, because I think a lot of his good stuff really came after that.
Right.
And like I say, he's in the industry today. Dear good friend of mine.
Right.
Can't wait till the next time I get to hang out and hear more of his awesome stories. Other fact about him was, not only was he a graphic designer, rock and roll artist, comic book illustrator, and writer, he was also an escape artist.
Say what?
Yep, he was a big fan of Houdini, so he did a lot of escape work. He's been buried alive.
No.
Yep, he's done that.
Oh, man.
He's almost died at least once doing an escape stunt. Hopefully one day we can get him out here and he can tell some of these stories himself.
That would be awesome, my friend.
I just like sitting down with him because he's been in the industry for so long that he's known, you know, he's had dinner with Bill Finger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was really good friends. He would take Bill Finger out to dinner, have nice long chats.
Yeah. Now, he helped Bill Finger get his name on stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for those who may not know or forgot who Bill Finger was, please drop that knowledge.
He's the guy that designed Batman that we know today.
That's right.
Because you remember that
oh, yeah,
ugly Batman that Bob Kane came up with.
Yeah. And Bob Kane, well, he's not a nice guy.
Nope. Well,
to put it mildly.
In fact, you remember that History of Comics that I had showed you back a few episodes back?
Yes.
In that book, because Jim wrote that book, there was a big section about how Bob Kane wasn't the sole creator of Batman.
Right.
You know, he gave Bill Finger a lot of credit. There was a nice big section about that when Bob Kane found out about that and he read it, he did not like that.
Oh, I'm sure.
And he actually confronted Jim about that, and actually pulled a little bitch move on him and slapped him in the face.
Oh, it got to fisticuffs.
Yes, but he did it. He slapped him and ran, basically.
Oh.
They were in the elevator together, and if Jim's seeing this, sorry that I'm repeating it, because I know he doesn't like the story. He doesn't like to tell it himself, but a lot of people ask about it. So anyway, they're in the elevator. Apparently, Bob Kane had read the excerpt about Bill Finger getting his dues. Didn't
Right.
like that.
Right.
So when the elevator stops, Bob Kane steps out, pauses. Right before the elevator door closes, he says, "See you later, Jim Baby," and gives him a backhand slap in the face. Right as the doors are closing, so that Jim cannot do anything back.
Yeah. Bitch move.
Yep. Needless to say, Jim finds him
Oh.
and returns the favor.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And Bob just stood there and took it, because what else is he going to do? Clearly, he's a coward.
Yeah.
So I won't go into too much details, because like I say, Jim doesn't like that story, so I'm not going to really get into it.
Thank you for sharing that, though. You don't hear those stories, or you don't know those stories, and thank you for sharing that and your knowledge of this latest batch of books that we have. I see that we have yet another batch. And so what we're going to do right here is we're going to break this off, and we're going to make this our first ever part 2.
Woohoo!
So thank you for yet again for doing what you do in the community, and for sharing these wonderful stories and of these books on how they really started this whole industry and community. And so this is the end of part 1.
See you next time.
Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed our extra special extended cut version. There was just so much good stuff. I had to play it all. If anything, we just took out maybe 5 minutes. So that was really cool and very hard to put together. I'm glad we did it. It was great. Thank you, Derek. But do me a favor. If you like what you saw and you heard, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you know when I'm throwing down new content. Keep searching for those books, because they're out there. Bye, y'all.